Hi, I'm Bob Moore with Alpha Software, and today we're going to take a look at the inner workings of the new UX component template featuring push notifications with the PhoneGap Pushwoosh plugin. This is video number 2 in this series. The first video describes the functionality of the component, so if you haven't seen the first video, you should probably do that before we get into the implementation details here. The first step in using Pushwoosh is to set up an account on the Pushwoosh website. You can set up a free account at pushwoosh.com. Once you've set up your Pushwoosh account, step number 2 is to add a new application to Pushwoosh. You'll need to add the name and the app icon, and your app will be assigned an application code. This application code is important, and you'll need to include this code in your Alpha Anywhere server-side API calls to the Pushwoosh service, so you will want to jot that down. Since we are going to be communicating with the Pushwoosh server from server-side XBasic in Alpha Anywhere, the next step is to get an API access token from the Pushwoosh server. So click on the API access menu item and click the green Generate New Access Token. In this case, I've already been granted an API access token, so I'll click on the Edit button so you can see the control you have over the authorization of what the app can programmatically do. In this case, I've enabled account modification, app modification, tags modification, and message sending. Since this is for development and testing purposes, this is fine. When you're going to move to a production environment, it's a good idea to restrict this API access to the features that you will really need within your app. In my case, I really only need tags modification and message sending and deleting. Next, we're going to add a custom tag that we'll be using to store the logged in user's name. This will associate the mobile device with the logged in user, and it will allow us to send a push notification to a specific user. From here, we need to set up a filter called admin, and we will add the Alpha Security login username that we would like to send push notifications to. This user, or it could be a group of users, will receive a push notification when any of the app users log in or log out of the app, or when they check in or check out of a location. The login notification includes the username, the date and time of the login or log out. The check-in or check-out notification includes the username and the date and time that the user checked in or checked out, and it also includes the address that was reverse geocoded from the latitude and the longitude of the device. Since we are going to be requiring reverse geocoding, we're going to have to get an API key from Google for use with their geocoding API. We'll do that in a later step. Since the goal is to allow our app to receive push notifications when it's running on either an Android or iOS device, the next steps are required to register the app for push notifications from both the Google Cloud Messaging Service and from the Apple Push Notification Service. We'll start with the Android app first because it's much simpler to configure. You'll need to set up a project on the Google Cloud platform. Here I am logged into my Google developer account at console.cloud.google.com. I've already set up my project called alpha-test-shell, and it has been assigned a Google Project ID and a Google Project number. You'll need to create a new project for your app, which you can do by selecting Create a Project from the top right menu. Now we've got to enable and manage the APIs that we'll be using. Click Enable and Manage APIs, and the first thing we'll tackle is enabling Google Cloud Messaging, which is listed under Mobile APIs. In my case, this API is already enabled. You will need to enable it for your app. Since our app requires the use of the Google Maps geocoding API to reverse geocode the latitude and longitude of the device, we'll also need to enable that API for this project. It is listed under Google Maps APIs. Next, since the Alpha server is going to be initiating calls to the API, you'll need to create a server API key. This is done under Credentials. Click Create Credentials and select Server. You should restrict access to your server IP address and you'll be assigned a key. You will need this key for the Alpha server as well as the Pushwoosh server, so copy and paste it to a text file for easy retrieval. Next, we need to configure Pushwoosh for Android. From the Pushwoosh application screen, configure Android to use the server API key that was generated earlier. You can cut and paste this from the Google Cloud Platform credentials screen to Pushwoosh. Make sure to select the PhoneGap Build framework and click the Save button. Next, it's time to generate your iOS credentials. When using PhoneGap Build, you will need to configure your app to properly use the Apple Push Notification service as well as provide PhoneGap Build with the proper credentials to build the app that you'll be using with the APNS SSL certificate that you will have uploaded to Pushwoosh. iOS push notification configuration is well documented on the Pushwoosh website, and they also have an iOS auto configuration utility that should be helpful for Windows users without access to a Mac running OS X. The thing that is missing is how to properly configure PhoneGap Build to use the proper developer certificate and credentials for use with the app that you have authorized to use the Apple Push Notification service on the Pushwoosh server. So I'll run you through both steps using OS X, since this should provide you with a clear picture of what's required. Step 1 is to generate a certificate request. With OS X, we do that with Keychain Access. Select Keychain Access, Certificate Assistant, request a certificate from a certificate authority. Enter the required information and select the Save to Disk option. You'll need this file in Step 2, so keep it in a location that's easy to get to. Next, you need to create an app ID and enable push notifications for this app ID. From the Apple iOS Developer Center, click on Certificate Identifiers and Profiles. Next, choose Identifiers, and you'll see a list of your existing app IDs. Here you can see that I have a few app IDs, including one that I've already configured for use with Pushwoosh. If you've used PhoneGap Build before, you probably have a single app ID that's set up as a wildcard ID. This is typical for development purposes, but for use with push notifications, you need a specific app ID that is authorized to use the Apple Push Notifications Service certificate that you will upload to Pushwoosh. I'll create a new app ID to guide you through the process. Click on the plus key to add a new app ID and enter in the app ID description. Next, enter an explicit app ID that will be the same as the app ID or the bundle identifier that you will use with PhoneGap Build. This is entered using the reverse domain name convention. In this case, I'll enter com.alphasoftware.mypushtest. Next, check Push Notifications from the list of app services and click Continue. Then Register, then Done. The app ID is now created, and we'll need to edit the configuration to configure push notifications for this app ID. Click the Edit button. You'll need to create an SSL certificate that authorizes this app ID for the Apple Push Notification service. We'll create a development SSL certificate since we're not ready for a production certificate at this time. Remember, when you're ready to go live with a production app, you'll need to generate a production SSL certificate. Click the Create Certificate button. You'll now see the Apple Push Notification Service SSL Certificate Assistant screen. Click Continue. We need to upload the certificate signing request file that we created earlier with the Keychain Access utility. Click the Choose File button and select the CSR file previously saved. Next, click the Continue button and then click the Download button to download the SSL certificate to your drive. Click Done. Double-click on the downloaded certificate to install it in the Keychain Access application. This is the SSL certificate used by Pushwoosh so that it can use APNS to send push notifications to your app. Next, export the certificate. This is the first file you'll upload to Pushwoosh. Next, you need to export the private key. Again, from the Keychain Access application, select the Keys category and click on the private key associated with your iOS push certificate and click Export Items in the menu. You'll be prompted to create a password, which will be important to write down because you'll be entering this password on the Pushwoosh iOS configuration page. This creates a P12 file, and it is the second file that you will be uploading to Pushwoosh. Now, to install the certificate and private key for use by Pushwoosh, log into your control panel and select the application. Click the Configure page in the left menu and select the iOS platform. Next, you'll select the certificate file and the push certificate that you generated in the previous steps. Enter the private key password that you used when saving the P12 file. It has to match exactly. Select the PhoneGap Build framework and click the Save button. Pushwoosh is now properly configured to use your APNS certificate for your app ID. Next, it is important to configure PhoneGap Build to build an iOS app with the app ID we just configured for push notifications. In order to do this, we'll need to create the PhoneGap credentials and upload them to PhoneGap Build. Here we have brought up my Apple Developer Certificates, Identifiers, and Profiles page. You can see that I have two iOS certificates, one that we just created, the APNS Development Certificate, and an iOS Development Certificate. The only reason that I'm going to create a new iOS Development Certificate is to guide you through the process. If you already have an iOS Development Certificate, you can use it with PhoneGap Build. Click the plus button. Next, under the Development section, select iOS App Development. When you move your app to the production phase, you'll need to go through this process again, and you will select Production, App Store, and Ad Hoc. Click the Continue button. This will bring up the info page about creating a CSR, a Certificate Signing Request. This should look familiar to you since we just went through a similar process when creating the APNS certificate. From within Keychain Access, select Keychain Access, Certificate Assistant, Request Certificate from a Certificate Authority. Enter your email address and a name for your private key. Here I'll enter REM iOS Dev to distinguish the private key. Leave the CA email address empty and click the Continue button. Save the CSR in a known location so it can be used in the next step. The certificate is now created. Click the Done button. Next, from the Apple Developer Portal, choose the CSR file you just generated and click the Continue button. Next, click the Download button. Double-click on the CER file to install on Keychain Access. Our next step is to export the iPhone Developer Certificate we just created. If you have multiple developer certificates, as I do, expand the certificate tree to verify the name of the private key. It will match the name entered when you generated the certificate signing request. Next, right-click on the certificate title and select Export. This generates the P12 file that you will upload to PhoneGap Build. You can name it anything you want, but don't change the extension. You'll be prompted for a password to protect the exported item. You'll also need to enter this password to unlock the certificate on PhoneGap Build, so make sure to jot it down. Next, you may be prompted for the login keychain password. Enter your OS X login password and click Allow. Now it's time to generate the provisioning profile. According to Apple's documentation, the provisioning profile is a collection of assets that uniquely ties developers and devices to an authorized iOS development team and enables a device to be used for testing. In other words, a provisioning profile contains the information that the operating system needs to verify whether an application is permitted to run on a specific device. This implies that the provisioning profile needs to be installed on each device that the application needs to run on. From the Apple Developer Portal, click on Devices, All. This is a list of your developer devices that have been previously authorized for use. There's a name to identify the device and the UDID of the device. The easiest way to get the device identifier is with either Xcode or iTunes. We'll use iTunes with the device plugged into the USB port. Here, my iPhone 6 is plugged in and we're looking at the summary info. If you click on the serial number, the UDID will appear. Copy this number to the clipboard so that you can paste it into the Apple Developer Portal when you add a new developer device. I'm not actually going to do that now because the portal is indicating that I must do a reset. In the end, you need to add all of the devices that you would like to test with. The limit for developer devices is 100 per device type, so you can add up to 100 iPads, 100 iPhones, 100 iPods, etc. Next, we need to create a provisioning profile. Click on Provisioning Profiles, Development, and you may see a list of existing profiles. I'll create a new one to walk you through the process. Click the plus key. Select Development iOS App Development. Click the Continue button. Now select the app ID that you want to use push notifications with. This is really important. This must be the app ID you used when you created the APNS credentials that you uploaded to Pushwoosh. In this case, it is My Push Test. Next, select the certificate that you want to include in the provisioning profile. The certificate that the app was signed with needs to be included. If you have multiple development certificates, you can select all, but in most cases you only have one. Click the Continue button. Next, select all the devices that you would like to include in this provisioning profile. I'll select all. Click Continue. Next, name the profile. You can see we are generating an iOS development provisioning profile for the app ID named My Push Test. You can also see the number of developer certificates and the number of devices included in this provisioning profile. If everything looks okay, click the Continue button. Your provisioning profile is then generated. Click the Download button and then Show in Finder. Copy this file to the same location you used for your P12 file, because you will need to upload both to PhoneGap Build. Click Done and you'll see the new entry in your iOS provisioning profiles. We're now done with the Apple Developer Portal and we have all the files required for uploading to PhoneGap Build. These are the P12 file and the provisioning profile that we just generated and saved. Now these credentials need to be uploaded so that PhoneGap Build has the proper credentials to build the app associated with the app ID that is going to be using the APNS credentials on the Pushwoosh server. You may already have the wildcard app credentials loaded on PhoneGap Build, but you cannot use them to build the app that will be generating push notifications. Log into PhoneGap Build and click on the down arrow in the upper right. Select Edit Account. Click on the Signing Keys tab. Click on the Add a Key button under iOS. Give this key a name that will remind you that it's tied to a specific app. Now select the P12 file and the provisioning profile that we just generated and upload those files to PhoneGap Build. The key will appear. This is the key you must use with the app ID associated with the APNS credentials on the Pushwoosh server. You can make it your default key and unlock it and enter your certificate password. PhoneGap Build does not check the validity of the password. It will accept anything and unlock the file. However, if the password does not match the certificate password, the build will fail, so make sure you get this right. You are now ready to modify the alpha component template to include your Pushwoosh and GMS credentials so that you can build a working app on PhoneGap Build that includes push notifications. We will cover that in the next video entitled Configure and Build the Pushwoosh Template App. In this video, we covered 20 steps required to set up a Pushwoosh account, generate a Pushwoosh API key, set up a custom Pushwoosh key for the logged in username, set up a Pushwoosh filter, create a Google App ID, enable the Google Cloud Messaging API, enable the Google Maps geocoding API, generate a Google Server API key, configure Pushwoosh for Android using Google Cloud Messaging, generate a certificate signing request for the Apple Push Notification service, set up a new iOS app ID, configure the iOS app for push notifications, create the APNS SSL certificate for Pushwoosh, export the APNS certificate private key for Pushwoosh, upload the APNS credentials to Pushwoosh, create a new iOS development certificate, export the iOS development certificate for PhoneGap Build, generate a new iOS provisioning profile, export the iOS provisioning profile to PhoneGap Build, and finally generate a key on PhoneGap Build using the iOS credentials we just created for use with the Push Notifications app. We covered a lot of ground in this video, and all of these steps are necessary to successfully run the Pushwoosh component template on iOS and Android devices. Once you've got everything properly configured, stay tuned for video 3 in this series, Configure and Build the Pushwoosh template app. Thanks.